The Black Death was one of the most devastating plagues in history. Would it be like to survive it? Or would you fall victim to the temporal dragon's madness and will need to be cleansed from this world? What's up, everyone? And today we're answering the question, can I survive the Black Plague? If you enjoy this video and want to see more questions answered, stay tuned. The Black Plague was caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis. There were 3 different types of the Black Plague. The first type was the bubonic plague. This form of the plague was the worst because it had the highest mortality rate. First things first, you need to avoid getting infected in the first place. This theory came about because the pneumonic plague was so deadly and so quick. To protect yourself from the bad air, people wore masks with herbs and flowers inside of them. If the plague was spreading through the air, then being close to a dead body would expose you to large amounts of the bacteria. Get lots of rest and eat healthy foods. These things will help improve your overall health. And if you do contract the plague, it will help your body fight off the illness. Alcohol and tobacco will only weaken your body and make it harder to fight off the illness. That all depends on what form of the plague you contracted. You may have been quarantined for months. And if you were in a major city, there was a good chance that's where you died. If you were able to successfully treat the bubonic plague, you would make it. You might be left with some scars, but you would live. The same goes for if you contracted the septicemic plague. If it was caught early and antibiotics were administered, you would survive. But if you contracted the pneumonic plague, then you probably wouldn't make it. Even with treatment, there's a 30% chance you would die from the pneumonic plague. Without treatment, there's an 80% chance you would die. But there are other things you can do to help boost your immune system. Bloodletting was a common practice during the Black Death outbreak. This is the process of removing blood from the body. Stay safe and stay healthy. During this time, it was believed that balancing the humors would prevent and cure illnesses. Phlebotomy is still used today in certain circumstances, but it's not recommended as a way to help boost your immune system. During the Black Death outbreak, many people would attend funerals for their loved ones. This was another huge mistake. Funerals became breeding grounds for the plague. But during the plague outbreak, many people turned to herbal remedies to try and cure their illnesses. Common herbs used during the outbreak included lavender, rosemary, sage, and thyme. Even if these herbs did not cure the illness, they might make you feel better. Certain herbs can help reduce fevers, which is something you'll need to do if you contract the plague. The handling of the dead bodies spread the disease even further. Bodies would often be buried together in mass graves, further increasing the spread of the plague. Although it sounds logical to try and cover your nose and mouth so you don't breathe in the bad air, this actually increased your risk of contracting the disease. The flowers and herbs would trap bacteria, and when they were breathed in, the bacteria would be inhaled directly into your lungs. This led to people wearing masks with sweet-smelling substances such as musk, cloves, lavender, and mint. These substances were meant to counteract the bad smells of the plague. In reality, these sweet smells only served to increase the amount of bacteria in the masks. The primary way the plague was transmitted was through flea bites. Again, this goes back to avoiding the bad air. But it also reduces your chance of being exposed to someone who might have the plague. Try to avoid contact with anyone who shows signs of illness. If you can, isolate anyone who shows signs of the plague and try to keep them outside of your home. Sounds simple, right? Well, during the Black Death outbreak, people didn't really know how the disease was spread. They also didn't know that isolating the sick was a good idea. So most people kept the sick inside their homes. Keeping the sick in your home drastically increased the chances that everyone in your home would get sick. This proved to be a horrible mistake. Fleas usually live on rats and mice, so keeping away from rodents is a good idea. If you absolutely needed to be around rats or mice, then make sure to cover up. Wearing long sleeves and tucking your pants into your socks will help protect you from flea bites. Avoid scratching any bites you do get. This may be hard, but it's important. Scratching the bites will only aggravate them and could lead to infection. And never put any creams or ointments on the bites. Some people believed that covering up and protecting yourself from flea bites was enough to prevent the spread of the Black Death. Within a few days of contracting the illness, victims would experience difficulty breathing, bloody sputum, and chest pains. The third form of the plague is called the septicemic plague. This form of the plague enters the bloodstream and affects the entire body. Symptoms of this form of the plague include fever, chills, weakness, pain, and bleeding. All three forms of the plague were horrible and had very high mortality rates. At the time, people had no idea how to treat any of these forms of the plague. And those who became infected most likely wouldn't make it. Today, however, there are antibiotics that can be used to treat the plague. With treatment, the bubonic plague has a 15% mortality rate. Untreated, it has a 60% mortality rate. The pneumonic plague has a 30% mortality rate with treatment and an 80% mortality rate without. And finally, the septicemic plague has a 100% mortality rate regardless if the patient receives antibiotics or not. This is the most common form of the plague today and the most common form during the Black Death outbreak. People who contracted this form of the plague experienced painful swellings of the lymph nodes near the areas where fleas had bitten them. These swellings would grow and become filled with pus. Other symptoms included fever, chills, weakness, and pain. As the illness progressed, the buboes would burst, leaving the victim covered in blood and pus. This is the same bacteria that causes the illness commonly known as the plague. Today, the disease is most common in Madagascar, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and the United States. However, during the 14th century, this deadly bacteria made its way from Asia into Europe and North Africa. It arrived in Europe in 1347 when an estimated 12 million people would perish from the illness. Also, don't forget to smash that like button to better your chances of survival. Although today we have antibiotics that can be used to treat the plague, at the time, people had no idea how to prevent or cure the illness. Another form of the plague was the pneumonic plague. This form of the plague starts in the lungs and can be spread through coughing or sneezing. So what would it be like to survive the Black Plague? During the Black Death outbreak, people began to believe that the disease could be spread through bad air. If you were out and about, try to keep some distance between yourself and other people. You should also avoid close contact with anyone who has died. Easier said than done, right? If you've made it this far and you haven't gotten the plague yet, you should start taking precautions to boost your immune system. Another thing you could do during the Black Death outbreak was use herbal remedies. Again, this isn't recommended. And finally, you should avoid alcohol and tobacco. These things aren't good for you in general, but they especially won't help you out if you contract the plague. Now for the million-dollar question, if you did contract the plague, would you survive? A better question to ask would be, would you have the courage to join Heike Knights in their holy war against the temporal dragons? Surviving the Black Death would be horrible, even if you made it. You most likely saw family and friends die. Would you survive the Black Plague? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something new.